Hello and welcome to Journeys and Journals. I'm Bernie Martin Beck, and we get to travel back in history. Way back, I think you can read 1899 here, and it says, "My dad made this." Look at this priceless little boy. Yeah, they dressed boys that way back then. But let's ask my guest today about these bags of, what are they, Bob?
Well, those are bags of Snowy Butte flour.
Snowy Butte.
Yes.
Where's Snowy Butte?
Well, that's in Eagle Point. And in 1899, the name of what's now the Butte Creek Mill was called the Snowy Butte Mill.
Of course, that's origins, huh?
Absolutely. And of course, Mount McLaughlin is quite prominent from Eagle Point, and that's the Snowy Butte.
Why did they change that? That's very, very good. Eagle Point, a little bit of Jackson County.
A little bit of Jackson County on Highway 62 heading up towards Crater Lake, just north of Medford.
On the way to Becky's.
Yes.
If you haven't stopped at Becky's for a piece of pie, well, she makes it almost as good as Mother did, just especially when it's huckleberry season. But this is what you're here to talk about.
Yes. That is a classic photo of the Butte Creek Mill taken in about 1875, maybe 1880.
Now, how do you know that you can date it? They didn't keep good history records on the back of this.
Well, they didn't keep too good a history records, but I knew that they added an addition onto the mill in about 1885. And that addition was a country store. You can see from this photograph, the proud people standing on the roof have a brand new addition that just went right on down the roof line to add the general store to the mill, and that's all new construction. And so I'm dating that photo in your left hand is from about the 1870s, and the one on your right, the 1880s.
Well, now, I like these horse-drawn vehicles. What were they bringing?
They were bringing load after load of wheat to be ground with our grindstones into flour.
Wheat grown where?
Well, the wheat was grown all over the valley, really. There were quite a few wheat farmers in those days, and of course they were all pretty poor, and so they'd bring their grain in to be ground, and the reason the store was added to the mill was because the miller always kept 1 out of every 7 bags for his payment. So he needed to have a place to sell his flour.
You mean it was kind of a barter system? You bring your grain and...
It was a barter system. The Indians bartered with huckleberries and leather goods and baskets. And so different people had different things. I imagine there were pigs and everything else you can think of.
Well, my dad sold cars, and
Oh.
he sold a car and got chickens for it.
There you go.
And another time he got a piece of property out Murphy Creek. Oh my. And that's how lots of business was done.
Sure.
Well, now from that front porch right there, it doesn't look a whole lot different to today.
It really has not changed, and there's even a door on the second floor just above that front porch that's in all the photographs. It's the original door that we, to this day, auger our grain up into the attic.
Excuse me.
Yep.
This is what you're calling auger?
That is a type of auger. That's exactly right, and that augers the grain up. That particular auger you have in your hand, the mill is built with post and beam construction, and when they would join the beams together with notches, they would drill a hole through both of them and then put a wooden peg, usually made out of oak, and that's what put the entire frame together, because the frame was raised first, and then the siding was nailed on with square nails, which we still have all the square nails nailed into the siding on the outside.
Did I understand that you invite us to come with the kids and show off the way things used to be made?
We absolutely love to have kids there. We have classrooms all the time, and I don't care if there's 1 or 20, we'll give them a tour down into the basement where the mill race comes in and into the milling room, and they can learn how. We'll even give them a sample of grain to take home with them.
Now, you're talking mill race. You mean water?
Water.
From
Little Butte Creek, and that's diverted from our dam that's a half a mile upstream from our mill, and it diverts into this mill race and comes right inside the mill and turns our turbine that turns our giant grindstones.
Okay, how big are these stones?
These stones were milled in Paris, France in 1872, and they are 4 feet in diameter and weigh 1,400 pounds apiece.
You mean they have been growing around and around for
34 years.
One stone. You don't have to trade.
We have a lower stone, which is called the nether stone, and the upper stone, which is called the runner. And that upper stone is what turns, and the grain through little finger gullies, I guess you could call them, that are chiseled into that stone, feeds the flour out the edges.
Hard rock.
Yep.
What's that about?
That rock was from a special quarry outside of Paris, France, that's been used since the Roman times to make millstones because it's so hard.
The Roman times.
Roman times.
Now, Rome needed ground wheat.
That's exactly right. And that quarry has been used all these many centuries.
Well, I heard that story that somebody, some great, kind, generous, benevolent person came in with this.
Yes, that just happened really this morning. We have a lot of people in the area that are thrilled to see that the mill is full of activity and that we're trying to tell the story of the history of the area and how grain is ground into flour. And this nice man brought in these photographs of old wheat harvesting times, some horse-drawn equipment from back at the turn of the century, and it's just fascinating to see what went into the process of harvesting wheat.
Okay, now horse-drawn, you say. I have a picture here. I couldn't even believe it. Well, this even says Harris. Who knows? If side mill. Maybe somebody's going to say, well, that was my grandpa.
Sure.
This little spot here is what?
Well, you have a man out on a boom holding on to the reins of up to 20 horses, and he's riding out literally almost over the horses, holding onto the reins to pull that massive piece of equipment that is, the gears are turning and it's cutting the wheat.
Oh my, thank goodness for modern conveyances, but you know, this was genius.
Oh, it certainly was.
It was an absolute genius. You're here to tell me about a lot more than mills and things like that. This is so funny that I thought you ought to tell that story. Golden West.
Golden West coffee. That was produced by Closet and Devers in Portland, Oregon at about the turn of the century up to the early 30s. And that trademark I've always liked, and I've collected the old Golden West coffee cans and posters, and we're going to sell it in the mill. And we've really taken that trademark, and I found who owned the trademark, and I pay him a nominal fee, and our coffee that we will be serving in the mill is going to be called Golden West Coffee, and we're going to grind the beans with our antique coffee grinders, the double wheel coffee grinders, and serve it there daily.
You don't.
Well, the little lap models are good for home use, but the general stores use the big double wheels so they could get a bigger volume.
Now, you had some things for sale besides, when I say you, historically, the mill had these items that were barter items.
Yes.
Besides flour.
Sure.
And corn.
Oh, yes.
Why corn? What's so special about corn?
Well, I mean, when you think about it, it's the staff of life like grain was only to the Indians, and over a period of time it has probably maybe even surpassed grain, but it's just extremely nutritious, and it is good for you. And at the mill, we grind it into corn grits and corn flour, and we have cornbread mixes. And the beauty of it is it tastes like corn. The stuff that is refined now tastes more like cake.
Oh, sure, lots of sugar and hydrogenated shortening and stuff like that. But now that's not the only thing the mill was good for.
Yes, now that's an interesting saw, isn't it?
It is. I don't know that I could cut a good tree with this. It doesn't have sharp teeth except for
they're
points.
pretty sharp. They're just big. Well, I found that when we were cleaning out the lower level of the mill, and I knew that in the old days we had a meat locker. And well, prior to having the meat locker, they stored ice that they would gather off the rivers, maybe go up to Diamond Lake, store it in a sawdust-lined room, and when people had ice boxes, they would cut chunks of ice, blocks of ice, with that very saw, and then use the ice tongs to put it in we had a lady through the mill who told me when she was a girl, she pulled her wagon up to the mill, got a block of ice, and her big treat was to chew a little chip of ice on the way home, and then she got it home and they put it in the ice box.
That's a local lady?
That's a local lady.
Oh my, I hope you'll get her story down.
Oh, she's a regular customer.
Get a photograph and her story down. But you have some antique items. I don't know what this one was for.
Well, in the old days, they used to have a meat rack in their freezer, and that was to hang. There were dozens of these that we found buried in the basement that they used to nail those to a wall, and they would hang a side of beef or a pig or whatever it might be. And then we had a meat locker on the far end of the building that was put in 1930, and that was a big improvement over just a sawdust-filled room with ice, because we had a water-powered compressor that actually pumped ammonia through these pipes, cooled this giant meat locker into about a 13-degree temperature, and we had 500 wooden doors with padlocks on them that were used right up till June of 2006 to keep meat in.
You'd rent a locker just like...
You'd rent a locker, which was very common back in the 30s and 40s when people didn't have freezers, but people still used them. If they had say they shot an elk and they had 600 pounds of meat, they'd come to the Butte Creek Mill to go into that locker and store their meat.
Wow.
Yeah. I said wow too, being a city boy.
being a city boy. You came here from where?
From Portland. Born and raised in Portland.
Well, Oregonians all
stick together.
native
Oregonian.
This is a fun picture, because this is not Butte Creek Mill. It's not. Nope. But it is Eagle Point, Oregon. Cheese factory.
Yep. That was built in 1895, just about 100 feet from the mill, and I own that. That came along with the mill property, and that's the old Ladino cheese factory. And we've had many, many people come by the mill and talk about the great cheese that they used to make there. And we've opened up an antique store in the Ladino cheese factory. We had to wait a little while because we had to put an ADA bathroom and an ADA ramp, but it's a beautiful antique store, and it's a beautiful building, and we've landscaped the area between that and the mill, so we have a nice lawn and picnic tables.
Picnic tables, folks. Bring your own picnic. And that was so much fun to go there. And that's one of the privileges of doing this show. I get to see fantastic things. So this is the mill.
That is the mill.
Right over here's the picnic tables.
Yep.
And right over here.
Yes.
Now, just beyond this is something extra, extra special.
Yes.
How in the world did you get across Butte Creek this morning?
As usual, I get up in the morning and I walk across the Antelope Creek Bridge, which spans Little Butte Creek, which feeds our mill. And it's a historic bridge that was moved there. I think it was threatened to be having to be demolished, and the city fathers of Eagle Point were smart enough to say you can move it to Eagle Point because there used to be a covered bridge in Eagle Point. So we got the Antelope Creek covered bridge, and I get to walk across it every day to work, and then I walk up to the post office and get my mail at Post Office Box 1, Eagle Point.
Aha! Now, that post office box is probably associated with the mill for
A long
ages.
time. Yep.
Maybe since the post office started,
Could
because
very well be.
your mill has to have predated. What else is famous, Eagle Point is famous for?
Well, Eagle Point is called the gateway to the lakes. That's their theme because it really is a gateway to a lot of beautiful lakes. But we have just actually between the antique store and the old cheese factory and the covered bridge, we have a wonderful historical schoolhouse that was moved in there. Now it's the Eagle Point Historical Museum. And it's a beautiful museum, and it's all volunteer run, and it's filled with artifacts from the whole Eagle Point area.
And if I cross the bridge or drive another 2 or 3 miles, there is the most important part of Eagle Point history. And that's a cemetery. The military cemetery, I don't know if it came because of Camp White, if it was part of.
You know, I don't know either, but I know it's one of only 2 in the state.
And we've been there for beautiful, solemn services with the gun salute and the trumpet blows, and it just a way to say thank you and farewell to men and women
Yep.
who served our country. And just around that was country. As I understand it, Camp White extended into Agate, those places. Butte Creek was probably already Eagle Point, where those names go way, way back.
Yeah, they do. They go way back into the 1870s.
As little towns that, who knows, maybe they predated Medford.
Yeah. Oh, they definitely did. Medford was much later than Eagle Point.
The reason Medford became a town, I understand, Jacksonville would have been a tough train detour.
Had something to do with the railroad and where they decided to put the main station, I think.
And the easiest road would be where I'd want to build a train station. Now, is this the beautiful hills and around you are just natural wonders besides the river or
yes.
creek? And something new has happened to those hills since I was a kid. In fact, since I moved back here 15 years ago, what's happening on those hills? What's growing?
The town is booming. It was the fastest growing community in the state of Oregon last year. More houses were built per capita than any place in the entire state. We have that beautiful golf course, Robert Trent Jones Golf Course, and that's been hundreds and hundreds of houses built there. And they're going to be building a lodge there with a beautiful restaurant. We have nice restaurants. 4th of July is the big time in Eagle Point.
Oh, let me add a little comment.
Sure.
I don't know if you and I are maybe the only ones that remember that when the Star Spangled Banner was played, men took their hats off. But in Eagle Point, they announced that before the playing of the national anthem. And I just burst with pride. I thought, these young people may not know. We're honoring. What a parade, what a festival they had.
Oh, the 4th of July parade goes right by the mill, and it's just beautiful, and they have a wonderful fireworks ceremony, and they have what's called the Avenue of Flags in Eagle Point. And they have American flags that have been donated from people who have had their loved ones buried there at the cemetery, and their name is put on a plaque in the Eagle Point City Hall, but the flag runs all the way through downtown Eagle Point, and eventually it'll run all the way up to the National Cemetery, and it's just a beautiful sight.
Now, there were so many things I learned the day that we were there for the parade, because it had a feeling of small town, like history had turned back.
Yeah.
And I'd recommend it to all of you to just, look forward to 4th of July. The town is in a way, just the way it was way back
yes.
when. There's a nice senior residence there that I know my friend Wendell White built, and but there's not a lot of new right downtown.
No.
Around it, spectacular views.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And I think you will see some terrific historic themed buildings being built in the downtown area over the next couple of years. There's a lot of activity on the drawing board.
Maybe another miniature mill, or maybe some, this is what?
That is cocoa that we have specially made with our Butte Creek Mill photograph on it.
Well, that's fun.
Sure.
Why not tie into history? Now, if I've forgotten anything here that we need to talk about.
Well, you know, we've done so much out at the mill. The products, actually one of the best endorsements I think you could possibly have with our stone ground products is the Rogue Medical Center Hospital is now using them for their patients and in their cafeteria, which made us very proud, because they see the value to, when you grind wheat with stones, it's a very cold process. When you buy wheat in a store, it's been run through a roller mill at very high temperatures, and you lose a lot of the nutrition. So we have a lot more nutrition in our products because of the old-fashioned stone grinding.
Now, you heard it here on Better Life Television. Isn't that an interesting, I've heard, you know, you don't turn things up and boil it to death.
Mm-hmm.
You bring it to a boil and let it just simmer there and cook. Why not?
Sure.
These stones, that would make a real difference.
It makes a huge difference. Even if you take a look at processed flour, the glycemic level in processed flour, it turns to sugar so much faster than whole wheat flour that's stone ground. That's much slower, and it's much better for you.
You metabolize it differently.
Yes, you do.
And certainly it's better for you with all the hull, what do you call it?
All the germ. Excuse me.
I was going to say chaff, but
Yeah.
that's not right.
No, 'cause
the
we-
outside is.
The germ is where all the protein and the nutrition is. And the wheat that we use has a very high protein content, because we do get the wheat out of Montana because they have pretty severe winters and springs, and when it's stressed, it makes a higher protein level, and if you bake, you like to have a high protein level.
Good for you food.
I've learned a lot in less than a year.
You certainly have. Now, in Portland, there is a mill, Red,
Bob's Red Mill.
and I got to tour that one. Really, it's so interesting, and it's for kids to get to see real food, where real food comes from, to see the process, and you encourage us to bring our kids?
We absolutely love to have kids, any number. We had 91 kids one day a week ago, and we broke them all into groups, and they all got to go and see the milling room and see the whole story.
Well, I've got a little picture here because I was lucky enough to get flour. This is what it went in as, and this is what it came out as. And there I was, like a school kid, saying, you bet.
I give them sample grain, and they can take it home, and if they put it in their garden, it will sprout within a week into beautiful grain.
And you can put it in water, and it'll
Sure.
even sprout in, like sprouted wheat. That's good for your food with high nutrition. Why would a kid from the city come to do something like this? Your background isn't in agriculture.
Not in the slightest, but I have been in love with history and old buildings. I always wanted to live in an antique building. I've owned antique houses, and I was tired of the rat race of a coat and tie every day and flying around on airplanes all the time, and this came along, and I knew the second I walked in I was going to make an offer. My wife was maybe not quite that quick, but she and I haven't had one regret.
Well, now, I met her behind the counter.
She's good with the money, the cash register. She doesn't let me near that. I don't even know how it works. Although we have an antique cash register in there that goes up to $1. That's the highest amount on the cash register.
Okay, there are a few items a little more than $1, but they're not really very expensive. I mean,
No.
a whole lot of, I don't know, could you make this corn, I don't have a mill at home.
Sure.
So you could,
That is the exact corn that we use to grind into cornmeal or corn grits or cornbread mixes. People with Dutch ovens love to make our cornbread because it tastes so authentic. All of these reenactors buy our cornbread mix.
oh, like when they're on these covered wagon
Yep.
trips and things like that because it's ready.
Yep.
Do you know about those reenactment?
Oh yes, we've had so many people come through the mill that Civil War reenactors. There's a club of Dutch oven owners that use all of the Butte Creek Mill
Okay, now
cornbread.
that's a
ovens.
whole nother genre
Oh yes.
of club, right?
You'd be amazed how many different interest groups there are out there.
Well, we saw the sidecar group the other day touring out at Merlin, and I'm going, yeah, why not? You all love this sort of thing, and they'd go on tours and
Well,
stop
sure.
at different low, out-of-the-way places because they love, who knows, this is a place that you can take your kids, you can take grandma and grandpa, you don't have to buy a thing.
No,
right?
heck no. They're
It's-
more than welcome. There's lots to see without having to buy anything.
But be sure to walk around the back down to the mill. We recently went to Eagle, oh dear, I forgot the name of the next town up from
Shady Cove?
Shady Cove for the daffodil show. You'll
Oh, yes.
want to
Beautiful.
do that next spring.
Yep.
And I mean, they said just drive up the hill. And down here, the daffodils were quite fully done, and up there, they were still in bud.
Yep.
Folks, we live in a wonderful area, and I hope you'll take advantage and go on those short jaunts up and around well, go over to Butte Creek and check it out. And do stop at the cemetery and say a prayer of thanksgiving, because we live in America. We are the luckiest people in the world. Thank you very much for
You are
being
very
my
welcome.
guest. And Better Life TV really appreciates finding out where food's available in its natural form. I'm Bernie Martin Beck saying thank you so much for tuning in.